I'm Tim Henriques with the Fantasy Book Ranking System, and today what we're going to do is we're going to review this standalone book, which is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. Pretty interesting, little bit of a unique story. It's a standalone single book, so we're going to check this out. For those of you not familiar with this, the Fantasy Book Ranking System, basically the idea here is I'm going to rank the book on a series of different attributes, and I'm going to compare it to other well-known popular books so then you can see if we kind of like the same thing. To me, one of the big flaws, you read something on Amazon, everything seems to get 3.5 to 4.5 stars, and you can't tell after reading a review whether you would like it because who knows what that person likes. So this way I'm going to be a little more clear. I'm going to go over different characteristics that you can either look for, that you want or not, and then I think you'll have a much better idea if you want to read the book after I'm done reviewing it. So that's really my main purpose. I'm not claiming to be a literary critic, but just want to help you, the reader, out. Secondary goal is a little bit selfish. I'm trying to help myself. I do hope to at some point write some fiction-based works. I've written non-fiction before in the fitness realm, but here I want to kind of dip my toe in fantasy water, so I wanted to take a deeper look at fantasy books and understand what made them tick, what makes the great ones great, different characteristics out there. So I'm trying to do this to help myself understand this. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to go through a series of 15 different characteristics. Generally going to rank it 1 to 10. 1 really is terrible. 6 is still pretty crappy. 8 is solid. 10 is unbelievably awesome. I will then give you what my definition of a 10 is, so you can see whether we have the same likes or not. I will also go over any flaws that I found, any kind of strengths, my overall impression, and then at the end of the review I'll give the book its unique individual FaBR score so we can see where it ranks up against the other fantasy books that are out there and if it's worth your time or not. So let's start off with this one. So we're looking at Uprooted. How epic is the story? 7.5. It's not super epic. There's kind of one small part of a land. Mainly a village is kind of in danger. It does broaden out a little bit to a little bit bigger part of the kind of realm is a little bit in danger. But it's not a huge sweeping story. Something like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, something like that. It's definitely not at that scale. Those would be 10s. So this is a 7.5. I didn't think it detracted from the story, but it wasn't like a massive part of it. How well written is it? I thought it was quite well written, so 8.5. She had some kind of interesting kind of takes on some things, cool kind of examples, some good metaphors. So I generally enjoyed the writing, a little bit of a different style, kind of refreshing style. So I thought that was a little bit of a strength. Definitely not on the level of like A Name of the Wind or Game of Thrones, which would get a 10 in that category, but it certainly didn't detract from the story by any means. How real did it feel? This one didn't feel super real. She tried to do certain elements, like describe how she would cast the magic and things like that to enhance realism, but still I didn't feel like this was necessarily a strength. I personally don't think it has to feel real, but if you like that, something like First Law Trilogy or Game of Thrones tends to feel quite real, whereas this was, more kind of watching the story unfold instead of you're right there next to the person as it happens. What lessons are taught? I think she was trying to portray some different lessons, some kind of viewpoints on life and appreciate things and kind of what you have coming up, and who can work together and things like that. So I thought lessons-wise, pretty solid, 8.5. Something like a Star Wars would get a 10, but still pretty good. Is the book a page-turner? I'd give this an 8 as well. So, you're interested in the story, you want to follow along. It's not something that's going to keep me up till 2 a.m., but at the same time, I did look forward to returning to reading it. Felt like it was a pretty easy and pretty quick read, so an 8 overall. Something like The Da Vinci Code or Maltese Falcon will get a 10. A little tough for fantasy books to get a 10, but sometimes they get a 9, 9.5 when they really hook you. How memorable is the story? Kind of the overall, there's a kind of a cool ending that kind of explains things, so that makes it somewhat memorable. The basic idea of kind of a maid in the village, and then she's going to get kind of taken away, still sticks with you, and then the twists on it are reasonably memorable. I did read this about 6 months ago, so it's pretty fresh in my head. But still, I think I could definitely foresee myself remembering most of the story. It's not, again, epic or something that's seared into me, something like a Star Wars, but still pretty solid. How memorable is the main character? So really there's just one main character, which is the lady. And so, she's reasonably memorable, certainly. One, honestly, just because of the fact that she's a female in a male-dominated field makes her stand out a little bit. Some of her power, some of the way she did things that she can do is kind of memorable. So that part's, again, decent. I could see some readers really connecting with her. For me personally, I didn't super connect, but it wasn't a negative either. Secondary characters I felt like a little more lacking. They're not going to stick with you that kind of long term. I don't think years from now I'll really have taken anything away from what the secondary characters presented in the story. How much do you want to read the next book? Not applicable. This is just a single story, so there's no sequel to this one. How rereadable is it? I don't think there's a huge draw to reread this. I think you can pretty much take the whole story in on that first round. But it's well written enough where if you wanted to, right, I'm sure you'd find some kind of some gems in there. But still, I don't think this would be like a massive must-read or must-study. Something like Game of Thrones would get a 10 for rereadability. How clear is good and evil? That it's pretty clear. There's you start off thinking it's super clear, and then it gets murky just a tiny bit, but it's still pretty clear who you're rooting for, what should happen, the way things are going. So I felt like it was reasonably clear, good and evil, which I personally tend to prefer. The prevalence of magic among the world, magic is kind of moderately available. So I mean, there's a wizard. Everybody knows there's a wizard, and so everybody's kind of afraid of that person. There are magical things, magical forests and stuff like that. Trees can move and grow super fast. So that's kind of out there. It's not just super excessive. And then the main character, she's a sorceress, so she's using magic pretty frequently. So kind of in a Harry Potter style. Not over the top like it's annoying, but it's a high level of magic use by the main character in a world that has a reasonable amount of magic. Age appropriate, not much really happens, so a really conservative person might think 12, but for me I'm a little more lenient. So 8 plus, there's not much sex, and there's like a kiss or two that takes place. Not a huge amount of blood. I mean, there's death, it's fantasy, but it's not graphic. So certainly 12 plus and probably 8 plus if they could get into it and would be interested in a story. Again, is the series finished? Yeah, it's just one book, so it's done. You can pick it up, start and finish, which is pretty nice. Nice week of reading to kind of pass the time. So, flaws that the book had. Like, the story's not super epic. Again, it's not really a massive flaw, but it's not going to be able to kind of rank up there against the true epics out there. It was an interesting story, but again, it didn't feel unbelievably real, so you definitely didn't kind of like feel like you're right next to the person. Secondary characters not super memorable. And then the specific details of the plot, I mean, they're not going to stay with you forever. So the kind of overall arcing theme, I think, will stay with you. Ending, kind of an interesting twist, but not an unbelievably just like, oh, this this is something that's seared in your memory, the plot forever. My overall impression is kind of an interesting twist on a basic plot point. The basic plot point being, a maiden is kind of given as a sacrifice for her town, but then it has kind of an interesting twist on that. It's got a female protagonist, so if you're looking for that, I think that'll be a definite plus for you. I could see this being a little more appealing for kind of those younger teenage readers, so that they could probably rank the book maybe a little higher than I might. Some interesting actions for some interesting explanations for the actions in the story. Why is the evil things doing what they're doing? Made kind of interesting sense at the end. She tried to make magic seem pretty real. It was definitely nothing along the line of Name of the Wind, but she tried to kind of explain, oh, this is how you do it, and this is how you feel it. And so that was kind of a cool twist, which made some sense. Like I said, probably ideal for teen readers. Those secondary characters aren't super memorable, a little bit of a weakness there. So what score would I give this on the overall ranking score, which again is not just a sum, but an overall individual unique score? I'd give it an 83. So it's a solid, enjoyable book. I generally would recommend it. Certainly if it sounds like it's interesting to you, then I think you'd really enjoy it. I still think you'd get something out of it by reading it anyway. But so pretty solid. And again, not an epic story that's up there and kind of a must-read 90 plus, but not a little bit of a weaker story in that 70 range. So pretty good, solid, worthwhile read. So if you're interested, give it a whirl. I certainly wasn't disappointed that I read it. I don't think you would be either. If you want to see more reviews like this, keep watching our YouTube channel, or go to my website, timhenriques.com, and look up on our fantasy book reviews. If you disagree with stuff I said, or you want me to do other books, feel free to leave me comments, and we can chat about it.